Now, as tensions between Israel and Iran reach a tipping point, the chessboard is seeing new moves in real time. US President Donald Trump is reportedly mulling the possibility, and you know all of this, viewers, because we talked about it yesterday, of overtly joining the war on Israel's side, a move that many say could shatter regional restraint and drag the region into a larger conflict, not to mention expose USA to the specter of reprisals. Meanwhile, as Trump ponders, Israel has taken some large strides in its stated objective of decapitating Iran's nukes. There's also talk of regime change, which could have its own attendant consequences. Now let's talk to Ian Bremmer, political scientist and founder of the Eurasia Group, to unpack the stakes, the viability of regime change, the limits of Israeli intelligence strategy, and why the West chooses to punish Iran and platform partner Pakistan, a nuclear-armed Islamist republic with a long history of supporting transnational terror groups that have struck globally. Let's go straight across to Mr. Bremmer. Mr. Bremmer, thank you very much for speaking to me this evening. It's obviously an important day, tipping point, some people are calling it, in this conflict. We're now being told that President Trump is mulling all sorts of options. First of all, how do you see this playing out? Will this lead to likely escalation? How dangerous? Will even Trump step in? Or is he trying to, as he always does, up the negotiating stakes?
I think the likelihood that the Iranians will give Trump what he wants now in a time frame that's acceptable is very low. He has essentially said surrender to the Iranians. The supreme leader said never going to do it. The Iranians are getting attacked. The head of the negotiations on the nuclear engagement was assassinated by Israel. So, I mean, you know, I think it's possible, but it's very unlikely. And barring that, I think it feels to me that Trump has basically made the decision that he's going to go in. Now, going in doesn't mean a ground war, and going in doesn't necessitate lots and lots of strikes, because Israel's already doing that. As you know, there's only really one major objective that is required in Iran that Israel can't do itself, and that is this critical nuclear facility in Fordow, which the Americans have the bomb for, and the Americans have the aircraft to deliver it. Israel has neither. I think that's going to happen. I think that's going to happen in the next 48, 72 hours. I think that's why the U.S. has announced the evacuation of its embassy in Jerusalem through Friday, and then it's closed on the weekend. So that seems to be the time frame. And Trump talking to the Iranians in much more hostile language, not about a deal, instead about sort of the urgency, the lack of patience, and talking about the military engagement from Israel in terms of that we are the ones that are determining whether the supreme leader will live or die. We are the ones that have control over the airspace. He wasn't doing that before. All of that is a reflection of, in the American president's mind, that he's already essentially involved in this military conflict. And if he hasn't greenlit it officially, it certainly seems like he's very close.
So how do you think Trump is going to get into this? What else can he do? You said that they have the capacity, the U.S. has the capacity to reach some of these enrichment facilities, especially the Fordow one, which is buried under a huge mountain, etc., etc. Is it possible?
Is what possible? Can they do that?
Yes. Can they do that? I mean, there are various estimates.
They can't do it with certainty. Yeah. Right? I mean, so again, I'm a political scientist. I focus on the geopolitical aspects. Mm-hmm. I don't have the technical capabilities to advise you on whether or not the military strike will be successful. those that I've spoken to in that field tell me that they don't have certainty, and that they would be advising Trump that they don't have certainty. That's right. I mean, in a sense, you're rolling the dice. But everything else, it's not like Israel has been sitting there ineffectively. Israel has done enormous damage to Iran's air defenses, to their ballistic missile delivery capabilities, and to their nuclear program outside of Fordo. And the analysts I talk to tell me that as of right now, Iran is likely their program has already been set back by a minimum of probably, say, 9 months, which is not nothing. Okay, in other words, the Americans don't need to strike this today in order to ensure that Iran doesn't get a bomb, right? I mean, that argument doesn't play, and it's important to recognize that.
Now, this is interesting because Trump positions himself as this anti-war, pro-trade president. He's been lecturing Putin, come to the table. He's been going after Zelensky, come to the table. He claimed falsely that he'd brought India to the table a few weeks ago. And yet, he doesn't mind pursuing what he defines is an interest that would serve humanity because he believes that Iran is some sort of a player that is going to, if it's given a nuclear weapon, be a threat to the world. There's a contradiction here.
Trump certainly facilitated a ceasefire announcement between India and Pakistan. How important that role was is, of course, debated by all three parties, and we don't need to get into that.
No, but hang on, Mr. Bremmer, that's been denied today. The Prime Minister of India spoke to Trump, basically walked him back on all the facts. You might have seen that. So there was no facilitation. Trump lied. And I have no hesitation in saying that because there has been no
I get it.
rebuttal.
And frankly, I mean, Trump's historical credibility and exaggeration is legion.
True.
I'm simply saying that Trump's position on this, even today, is different from that of your prime minister, and it's important for me to at least say that.
That's true.
On television, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, they haven't come out with a
I'm not going to
statement,
only
right. They haven't walked back.
Position.
You're right. They haven't walked back. I was only situating the latest out there for you.
From the latest only from the Indian Prime
right.
Minister. So you got to be careful about that, right? I mean, again, I understand you're an Indian news show, but you're asking me about a global issue. So let's present all sides. Now, it is certainly true that Trump has run on three major platforms: secure the border, where he's been successful; fair trade, where the jury is out, but so far he's been less than successful; and end the wars, where he's failed so far, right? He's failed to end the wars. Russia, Ukraine, he tried. He has so far failed. Israel, Gaza, he has tried, failed. Israel, Iran, he has tried, failed. So 0 for 3, right? And he's not happy about that. But there is a difference between a war in Afghanistan that went on for 20 years with American troops on the ground and what we are presently discussing on Iran. And I say that because you will, of course, remember that in Trump's first administration, where the Iranians were engaging in strikes against U.S. bases in the region and against the Gulf states, including a spectacular drone attack against the largest refining facility in the world in Abqaiq in Saudi Arabia. And the Americans were restrained and restrained and restrained. And then President Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Defense Forces. And of course, the supreme leader was incredibly angry and outraged, and there was going to be fire and brimstone against the U.S., and they did nothing. Their response was nothing. I mean, a couple of, sort of symbolic strikes that didn't have any impact, and then they basically capitulated. And of course, Trump remembers that. And it is true that there are Trump supporters today, and some of them are quite popular and public, like Tucker Carlson, for example, who strongly oppose military action in Iran. But I will tell you that most Trump supporters oppose the Ken Burns style war, right? Of like, sort of American troops on the ground, but they don't mind the TikTok war, the quick flash bang and then move on to the next thing. And so as long as what Trump does is the equivalent of Soleimani, then I think that will actually be quite popular in the United States. Now, of course, the danger here is that the United States attacks Fordo, and the Israelis want the Americans more involved, and they keep attacking, and the Iranians are becoming more desperate, and maybe they bring the Americans in by hitting American bases or disrupting oil through the Straits of Hormuz. That's the danger here, and that's absolutely possible. So, Trump makes this decision, and maybe it's not a very consequential decision. Maybe in a week we move back to just our regular lives, our regular programming. But maybe this becomes the beginning of a much broader war. And Trump, I think it's very important for Trump to consider those implications. I think it's a mistake for Trump to do this, personally. But I think he's going to do it.
But you do concede that Trump has basically walked back on being the anti-war president. He said, I will never have a war start under me. That's now clearly something that he said and he's walked back on. I mean, that's...
Will he... It's an interesting question. Again, I'm being completely honest with you here. I don't have any stake in this. I think that, the war started under Israel, but Trump did not oppose it.
That's right.
And that's inconsistent. Trump basically greenlit the Israelis striking
because if someone has, look, be very honest with you, I support the action to denuclearize Iran, even though I think there is a fundamental hypocrisy here. Look, there are certain states that are allowed to have nuclear weapons and certain states that are not allowed to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, North Korea, for example.
So there's a hypocrisy, and I recognize that.
For example.
But I'm looking at it from an Indian perspective, strategic depth, this, that, the other. The Islamic bomb, another state with an Islamic bomb that exports terror, cultivates terror groups that actually have warned India about Kashmir and so on and so forth. So I'm coming from that perspective. But Mr. Bremmer, I have to ask you this question. It's a worrying one, because as we speak, Trump is meeting with General Munir, who has just elevated himself to field marshal. And this man leads Pakistan. And if anyone looks at the facts, we know that Pakistan is a sanctuary of global terror. Terrorists from its soil have actually struck America, not once, but several times. One of those attacks was led by Osama bin Laden, who was found in Abbottabad. I don't have to tell you this. Yet, Trump is supping with Munir, and he is threatening the Ayatollahs, saying that you guys export terror. What is going on here? Why is he in bed with Munir? Some people say these are business ties.
I understand that India has a particular, sensitivity to everything that comes from Pakistan. They are.
No, but this is not an India issue. Let's be honest. This is a morality issue.
Okay. Yeah. So if we make it a global issue,
it's a morality issue.
If we make it a global issue, if we make it a morality issue, then you would have said the same thing about why Trump met with Kim Jong-un
precisely
in his first administration.
Exactly.
Right.
We did. We all did.
Why? And a lot of people ask the same thing about why Trump is so close to the Saudis, why he's so close to the Emiratis, why he's so close to the Israelis. And of course, the United States itself has a history that is not quite Canada, right? In terms of, we can look at Guantanamo and we can look at Abu Ghraib and, we can all sorts of things, rendition to black sites. The United States doesn't have its hands clean in these issues. But what we know about Trump is that he's completely indifferent to the idea that the United States somehow shares values with other countries, and therefore he should preference them. That is not the way Trump does business. When Trump was running for president the first time and he refused to criticize Putin, and which India does a lot of great business with the Russians, of course, and they don't seem to mind, including defense business, and they don't seem to mind that Russia's led by a war criminal. India seems fine with that. And so Trump was asked, well, how could you possibly do that? And he says, what? You know, the Russians kill people. You think we don't kill people? He said that. He said,
no, but let's confine ourselves to this like for like. Look, I'm comparing apples with apples here. Iran does exactly what Pakistan is accused of, right?
Yes.
Yet we have the Pakistanis sitting at the table and the Ayatollah sitting under the table, literally, in some bunker somewhere.
But Trump wanted to do a deal with the Iranians. He absolutely was prepared to engage. He sent his leaders to meet with them directly. I'm quite certain Trump would have been happy to meet with the Supreme Leader one-on-one.
Okay, so let's look at that. Let's look at that. So fine, what was the deal? Give up your nukes. Well, here is Pakistan, global exporter of terror.
No.
Those nukes could land in some dirty, the dirty bomb in some...
My friend, not give up your nukes because they don't have nukes. If they had nukes, you can't do that deal. Trump has been thinking about actually recognizing North Korea as a nuclear power. Why? Because they already have them.
Okay.
This isn't some principled stand.
Ukraine had them.
And the Iranians understand that not having nukes in a G0 environment is a very dangerous place to be, right? That's why they have a program to get nukes, because otherwise the Israelis can hit them with impunity.
Well, are you telling me that the Americans can't take out Pakistan's nukes in their silos?
I'm telling you that no one is considering an attack on either Pakistan or North Korea's nuclear weapons. That Trump in particular has a fear of countries with nukes and their ability to use them, their ability to deploy them, their ability to secret them away and have them used against God knows what. Yeah, I think that there's no one serious that would consider at this moment.
It's a very important point. You're making a very important point because the message that is now going out, whether you're Ukraine or you're Iran or anyone else that is watching this,
you need nukes.
Yes, you need. So basically, if America enters this to defang or whatever else to retard the capacities of the Iranians from making nukes or what have you, the world is going to be getting this signal that let's race and make nuclear weapons.
No, come on. You think that Gaddafi getting assassinated did not send that message? That Libya, you think they need Iran to take that message away? You think Saddam Hussein, didn't teach people that message? If you don't have nukes and you act like a rogue, or you are being threatened by a pariah, you are in serious trouble in a G0 world, of course. That's not a new lesson, my friend.
So then let's move the needle forward in our conversation. This is very interesting, and I'm glad that I'm sort of asking some of those questions that perhaps have struck a lot of us here in India. Regime change in Tehran is another big conversation that is taking place. What do you make of this? Are we, is this an option? Or is it a fantasy pushed by hawks in Tel Aviv and perhaps some in DC?
To the extent that it's an option, it is a potential option for the 92 million people of Iran. It is not an option for Israel. It's not an option from the air. It's not an option with drones and ballistic missiles and bombs. That's not how you engage in regime change. They can kill the supreme leader. Sure, he's 85 years old. There will be another. It is possible that theocracy will fall, but unless the Iranian people rise up against a capable and very brutal regime, far stronger than Assad's Syria, then it will be replaced by a regime which is just as militant as what you experience in Pakistan. So I don't think that regime change is something that is on the table unless you were thinking about a large ground intervention, which the Trump administration is absolutely not considering and will not, under any circumstances, consider.
So I have to ask you this, because can we hope that the war will serve as a deterrent to any new incumbent, if there were to be one, or the present regime in Iran, to
I think that this war,
a nuclear
as it stands right now, the war against Hezbollah as well as the war against Iran, is making it very clear that Iran has no friends. I mean, Iran has Russia. They've been providing all this support for the war in Ukraine. What has Russia done for Iran? And the answer is nothing to defend them, to help them. The Iranians send a lot of oil to China. What have the Chinese done for Iran? A very balanced statement. The Japanese expressed serious concern. The global South, many countries oppose Israel strongly. I mean, the South Africans want to bring the Israelis to the International Court of Justice. What are they doing? Not much. The Europeans are supporting Israel, with the exception of Finland. The Americans, of course, are backing Israel to the hilt. So, I mean, if you're Iran, you clearly understand that your geopolitical influence in the region and globally is de minimis. And as Trump would say, you really don't have the cards.
What do you see happening? Is this going to be a long, drawn-out affair? Or is it going to end sooner than later?
I don't know. We're going to find out. I mean, you don't have a crystal ball on this. We need to know how desperate the Iranians are. So far, the Iranians have acted with restraint. They've not attacked the American soldiers in the region. They've not attacked the Straits of Hormuz. They've not attacked Gulf refining capabilities. They've only attacked Israel, and very ineffectively, because they don't have the ability to get their missiles through Israel's missile defenses. A few of them have, but very few. And so, I mean, if that continues to be the case, this war is not going on for very long. If the Iranians feel like, this whole thing is potentially the end of the regime, or if the military is so depleted and fragmented that rogue units can start making decisions by themselves, then this could expand very dramatically. But I don't think that this is a matter of years, the way that Russia-Ukraine is. I think the broader question is what kind of regime emerges after the war in Iran, and do we have a much longer-term militant Hamas-type capability supported by a lot of Iranian oil and 90 million capable Iranian civilians? That's a pretty dangerous thing to have.
We end as we began on questions. Thank you, Mr. Bremmer. Fantastic speaking to you, and let's catch up in the next few weeks if this conflict drags on. Thank you very much.